Hello everyone, it's Channin here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we are going to create this bright and cheery card. This card features some cover panel dies from Honeybee Stamps, and these dies have some embossing details, and I'm going to share with you a really fun and easy technique to really highlight those details in the die. The cover plate dies I'll be using today are the new Delicate Daisy dies. There is a base and a top. The base is in my right hand, and I'll hold up to the camera here so you can see all the embossing details that the die will add to your panel. There's even embossing details on the top cover plate as well. I'm going to start with the base, line it up to an A2 panel, and then I'll run it through my die cutting machine. And even though there's a lot of detail in that die, you can see that it only cuts small little holes. Most of the detail in the die is embossed. Here is the top Delicate Daisy die, just lined it up with another A2 panel of white cardstock and run that through. This is obviously much more of a lacy cut with some pretty daisies. Now we're going to ink up this base. I have 3 Distress Oxides here. We're just going to kind of do this random, almost like camouflage-like background. I started with mustard seed. Now I'm moving on to spiced marmalade. And then we will finish up with some kitsch flamingo. And this is just some 3 colors that I really like together. And I like this palette. I think it's very happy and cheerful. Once I finish with that kitsch flamingo, getting all the remaining white spots, I'll then go back through some of my colors. Here I'm using that spiced marmalade, then finishing up with a little bit of the mustard seed just to kind of intensify the colors a little bit. Lastly, a little bit more of that kitsch flamingo. Now that we have that panel ink blended, I'm going to share with you this really fun and easy technique to highlight all those embossed details that are on our cardstock panel. So I have the Delicate Daisy cover plate base here, and I'm applying Right Persimmon Distress Oxide directly over this die. Not pressing, kind of swiping, maybe pouncing a little bit, but not pressing really hard because I just want to get that ink on all those raised areas. Those raised areas are what make the embossed details on our panel. So now I've grabbed my panel again that lines up with the Delicate Daisy base, and then I'm just going to line the 2 back up, kind of just matching the die cut holes back up with those parts in the die. And once I get it kind of locked in place, I'll then run it back through my die cutting machine. And what this will do is we'll transfer all that ink that's now on the die, on those raised areas of the die, onto our cardstock. And this will really, can see now finally all those details in that panel are really showing up now. They were kind of covered before, they're really subtle, I should say, and then got kind of covered when I ink blended over them. But by adding the ink to the die and then running it back through with my panel through the die cutting machine, it transfers that ink and it really makes them pop. I did it a second time here so you could just have that those areas a little bit darker and more pronounced. Now we're going to just repeat this process for our Delicate Daisy top die. So I have the die here, just inked it up with mustard seed. Now I'm going to take my die cut, line it back up with the die, pop it into place. This one's actually a little bit easier to line up because there's more areas that kind of match up. And then once I get it lined up, I'll run it through my die cut machine, and some of those details in that die, those embossed areas in the die, are now transferred yellow onto that panel. I'm going to repeat it one more time just to make it more pronounced, a little bit darker, also get any areas that I missed. You can definitely do this over and over again till you get it as dark and as pronounced as you like. And here is the finished panel. Those little daisies are a little bit highlighted now, and I really like how that looks. Now we're going to move on to our sentiment. I have the Big Time Kindness stamp set here. I pulled off Kindness, and we're just going to stamp it in intense black ink onto a scrap of white cardstock. After I ink it up and stamp it a couple of times, then we will grab the coordinating dies and die cut it out here. So I just stamped it twice. It looks nice and bold and crisp now. So here we're going to grab the dies. Here's the Big Time Kindness die set. Grab the Kindness die, line it up I'm going to grab a little piece of tape to hold it in place, and then I ran it through my die cut machine, and we have this perfectly die cut sentiment. We're going to finish the sentiment off with a sub sentiment, and I'm going to create kind of my own. I'm going to combine two sentiments together, so I have thank you for your. I'm going to heat emboss it, so I did apply some anti-static powder. Now I'm going to ink it up in Honeybee Stamps, Embossing, and Watermark ink, stamp it onto the black cardstock, and then dip it into some white embossing powder. Then of course I will heat set with my heat tool. After I heat set this sentiment, I will trim it down to a sentiment strip off camera. Here you can see it's all trimmed down, and we're basically ready to put this card together. So I did cut an A2 panel of some yellow cardstock to go behind our base panel. This is just going to make all those little holes, all those openings in the panel, they'll be yellow now. So I think that's a really pretty little detail when these panel dies are die cuts are stacked up. I love how there's all these layers. Just glued them together, then used a plate to kind of rest on top while that glue set up. Now I'm adding liquid adhesive to the back side of our top panel. Once I get this all covered with the adhesive, I'll just glue it directly onto our stacked panels. And we're starting to create this really beautiful layered and textured background here that it's just really going to be the star of our card. Now that those are all stacked up and ready to go, I noticed I had a little bit of overhang, or it was not quite lined up perfectly right, so I grabbed a pair of scissors and I'm just trimming off wherever you can see some of the colored panels kind of sticking out from behind the frame of the top panel. Once I finish cutting off all that excess, we will go ahead and glue this onto an A2 top folding white card base. I'm going to use my liquid adhesive adhesive here to glue this down, and then we are ready to move on to our sentiment. So the sentiment, I'm going to line it up here first on the card front just to get everything just lined up right, nice and centered. Then I'll grab a piece of low tack tape. I'm using micropore tape here, and place it over my perfectly lined up sub-sentiment and sentiment. And then I'll flip it over, and then I'm going to add some foam adhesive. You of course could use press and seal to hold your sentiments together while you add the foam adhesive, but the tape was handy and ready to go, so I used that instead. Now I'm just removing the backing on the foam adhesive. Then I will center this and pop it down onto our card front. Once I get it in place, I'll then remove that low tack tape that was just kind of holding them together, and that will actually complete the card. I'll hold it up here to the camera so hopefully you can get a really good look at all the texture and how those details, those embossing details, are really highlighted now by that right persimmon ink that we added to the background, and even that little bit of mustard seed that we did on the front, on the top panel. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.